Thank you for joining Wars of the Rosies as we continue with Part 5. The Genius of Masonry Continued, from Mystic Masonry by J.D. Buck. Chapter 3. The Genius of Freemasonry Continued. The traditions, glyphs, and ritual of Freemasonry cluster around the building of the temple, the legend of the widow's son, Hiram Abiff, who lost his life in the defense of his integrity, and the search for the lost word of the master. As the candidate progresses degree after degree, he is furnished with the working tools suited to his degree of knowledge and proficiency, given instruction as to their use. The lesser and greater lights are revealed and explained, and through all, each outer form or material thing is shown to be a symbol of a deeper mystery, a concealed potency. This is, in brief, the language and the philosophy of symbolism, or the exoteric and the esoteric garb of truth. The method itself, outside of all details or applications, has a deeper scientific significance than most persons are aware of. This method of instruction is not fanciful or arbitrary, but conforms to the process of eternal nature in building an atom or a world, a daisy or a man. Cosmos has evolved from chaos, and yet chaos remains the eternal potency, what Plato called the world of divine ideals. This will be more fully explained in a subsequent chapter. For the present, it may suffice to say that from primitive space, primordial ether, or what modern science might call the matrix or origin of the nebulous mass, the earth and all that it contains has evolved. The essential form, or ideal of all things, the potency or force, and the matter as we now discern it, must have existed in primordial space. Therefore, these two always exist, viz., the inner potency and the outer act, the concealed ideal and the outer form, the inner meaning and the outer event. Each is in turn a symbol of the other, hence the saying on the Smaragdian tablet, as above, so below. All outward things are therefore symbols or embodiments of pre-existing ideas, and out of this subjective ideal realm, all visible things have emanated. The doctrine of emanations is the key to the philosophy of Plato, and that of the Gnostic sects from which the early Christians derived their mysteries. The fact is mentioned here in order to show the deep foundation of the glyphics of Masonry. In the ritual of Masonry, King Solomon's temple is taken as a symbol. The building and the restoration of the temple at Jerusalem are dramatically represented in the work of the lodge, and in the ceremony of initiation, by a play upon words and parody of events, and applied to the candidate with admonition, warning, or encouragement as the drama unfolds. The measures and proportion of the temple are dwelt upon in order to bring science of numbers, form, and proportion so manifest in architecture, and to connect them with the spiritual temple, with which they all have the same, though less obvious, relations. The symbolism is fitted to ideal relations, rather than to actual existences or historical events. Sol Am represents the name of deity in 3 languages, and the biblical history is doubtless an allegory or myth of the sun god. There is no reliable history of the construction of any such temple at Jerusalem, and recent explorations and measurements have greatly altered the dimensions as heretofore given. Hiram Abiff is dramatically represented to have lost his life when the temple was near completion, and yet it is recorded that after the completion of the temple, he labored for years to construct and ornament a palace for the king. Add to these facts the statement that the temple was constructed without the sound of hammer or any tool of iron, and it is thus likened more nearly to the other spiritual temple, not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. And the literal and historical features disappear, and the symbolism stands out in bold relief. Masonic lodges are dedicated to the Saints John, one of whom, the evangelist, opens his Gnostic gospel with the Greek philosophy of the Logos, the principle of emanation referred to, and the other, the seer at Patmos, writes a book symbolical of ancient initiations. which many non-initiates have tried in vain to interpret. It may thus be seen that there is a deep significance in the dedication of lodges to the Saints John. Take, for example, Revelation 16:16, and the city lieth foursquare, and the length is as large as the breadth. And he measured the city with the reed, 12,000 furlongs. The length and the breadth and the height of it are equal, a perfect cube. And he measured the wall thereof, 144 cubits, according to the measure of a man, that is, an angel. The language is evidently a veil, designed to conceal the real meaning from the uninitiated, as the measure of a man, that is, a perfect man, or angel. We have the cube as a symbol of perfect proportion, hence a square man, the temple of Sol-Am-On, the cubical city, which unfolded becomes a cross, and hence the measure of a man, all these referring to the work of regeneration or initiation, the rebuilding of the temple after the plan drawn upon the trestle board, by which it shall be likened that spiritual temple, not made with hands, plainly refers to initiation, from which results perfect proportion and perfect harmony. In a later section of this work, this mathematical and geometrical basis of virtue and wisdom, or knowledge and power, will be further explained. It is unknown to the craft of Masonry, except in its bare outline and cruder symbolism. It is nowhere hinted that there is an inherent relation and full equivalent between absolute mathematics and spiritual power. A very limited knowledge of the history of primitive worship and mysteries is necessary to enable any person to recognize in the Master Mason, Hiram, the Osiris of the Egyptians, the Mithras of the Persians, and the Bacchus of the Greeks, the Attis of the Phrygians, of which these people celebrated the passion, death, and resurrection, as Christians celebrate today that of Jesus. Otherwise, this is the eternal and unvarying type of all the religions which have succeeded each other upon the earth. In an astronomical connection, Hiram is the representative of the sun, the symbol of his apparent progress, which, appearing at the south gate, so to speak, is smote downward and more downward as he advances towards the west, which passing, he is immediately vanquished and put to death by darkness, represented in following the same allegory by the spirit of evil, but returning, he rises again, conqueror and resurrected. After a long and very learned discussion of the phonetic and philological meaning, use and derivation of certain god names, Albert Pike says, page 79, Kuram, therefore improperly called Hiram, is Kuam, the same as Her-Ra, Hermes, and Hercules, the personification of light and the sun, the mediator, redeemer, and savior. And again, page 81, he says, it is merely absurd to add the word Abith or Abith as part of the name of the artificer. Abin, which we read Abith, means of my fathers, formerly one of my father's servants or slaves. As to the fellow crafts concerned in the conspiracy, they are shown to have more than one meaning. Astronomically, this relates to the signs of the zodiac, the three wicked ones, representing the winter solstice or death of the year, and consequent subjugation of the sun god. Other meanings will be shown further on. Is it an accidental coincidence, asked Brother Pike in Morals and Dogma, page 82, that in the name of each murderer are the two names of the good and evil deities of the Hebrews? For Yubel is but Yehu-Baal, or Yehu-Baal, and that the final three syllables of the names, A-O-M, make the sacred word of the Hindus, meaning the triune God, life-giving, life-preserving, life-destroying, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, represented by the mystic character here. And again on page 620, Brother Pike says, this word could not be pronounced except by the letters, for its pronunciation as one word was said to make earth tremble, and even the angels of heaven or the elements to quake with fear. The aim of the writer at this time is to show the general connection of Masonic glyphics with those of ancient times. The real meaning will appear further on. As already declared, modern Masonry being but an imitation of ancient genuine mysteries, the writer has no further design of reading into it a meaning which cannot be fully verified. For the greater part, modern Masons are dealing with symbols, the key for the real interpretation of which they never possessed or never suspected that it existed. It remains for the future to determine whether any considerable number of our Masonic brethren really desire to possess in fuller measure the living truth which the dead letter text conceals. That living truth exists and is accessible to every Mason as the dead letter or the dumb show under which it masquerades in every lodge. As to the sprig of acacia, Brother Pike says, the genuine acacia also is the thorny tamarisk, the same tree which grew up around the body of Osiris. It is the sacred tree among the Arabs, who made of it the idol Al-Uzza, which Muhammad destroyed. It is abundant as a bush in the desert of Thor, and of it the crown of thorns was composed, which sat on the forehead of Jesus of Nazareth. It is a fit type of immortality on account of its tendency of life, for it has been known, when planted as a doorpost, to take root and shoot out budding broths above the threshold. Here again, we see a symbol ages old, revived and adopted in many forms, and further that immortality was not brought to light for the first time and only time by the man of sorrows of the Christians. Yet in every case is the symbol none the less true, whether any of these sun gods or redeemers were historical characters or not. The symbolism teaches everywhere the same eternal truths, the resurrection and the life, redemption and immortality. After being obligated and brought to light, the candidate in the third degree is bantered with the statement that undoubtedly he now imagines himself a master mason. He is informed not only that such is not the case, but that there is no certainty that he will ever become such. He subsequently starts on his journey for the discovery of the lost word, the method by which he undertakes to obtain it, and the names of the three fellow crafts already referred to as brothers have a very deep significance. After many trials, he receives a substitute, which is to conceal with great fidelity, till future generations shall discover the lost word. The method by which he receives and is ever to transmit or use even the substitute is made exact and definite and guarded by solemn obligations. The meaning of both the great secrecy and the use of the word are left entirely to conjecture beyond the statement that it is a sacred name and must never be profaned, or taken in vain, or carelessly used. And I venture the opinion that not one Mason among 10,000 has ever been able to discover why. The force of the obligation is therefore in the oath and not in the reason. As a matter of fact, the real reason is scientific to the last analysis, scientific to a degree beyond the penetration, up to the present time, of the radiant matter, or the Roentgen ray of modern science. The word concerns the science of rhythmic vibrations and is the key to the equilibrium of all forces and to the harmony of eternal nature. This tradition of the ineffable name is brought into Masonry from the Hebrew Kabbalah, and how it became lost is partly historical at least. The ancient Hebrew priests evidently undertook to fit to the names of their tribal deities the symbolism and traditions of the Far East. If the Master's word were really a word at all, the deity of the Hebrews might perhaps represent it as well as any other. It is a question of phonetics, however, rather than mere orthography. Beneath the Hebrew text of the Pentateuch lies concealed the science of the Kabbalah. The anathemas threatened for him who should alter, by a single letter or yod. The outer text had therefore a deeper meaning. The priests of many nations of antiquity were initiates in the mysteries, and as such they were monotheistics, while the ignorant masses were idolaters. The monotheism of the Jews was of a robust character, and their priests and prophets had a hard time to preserve their people from the seductive polytheism and abominations of surrounding nations. The ineffable name was not only concealed, but terrible as an army with banners. Jehovah was jealous, revengeful, vindictive towards the evildoers, and tolerated no rival in the broad expanse of cosmos. In no religion of antiquity is the anthropomorphic image of deity so strongly defined, and the creator of man and worlds made so exceedingly human. The Kabbalah, on the contrary, embodying considerable of the true and ancient secret doctrine, held a different idea of divinity, while carrying the tradition, therefore, of the lost word as the ineffable name of deity. The symbolism was taken as literal fact, and the people were commanded to make no graven images, ended by making a gigantic idol, half Moloch and half man. Amid such contradictions, the symbolism adopted from the purer and gentler Aryans was ill at ease and far from home. Reverend Dr. Garrison claims in a Contribution to the History of the Lost Word, appended to Foote's Early History and Antiquities of Freemasonry, that the four-syllabled name Jehovah was held by the Hebrews as the ineffable, and that Adonai was used as a substitute. The high priest once a year, at the time of the atonement, entered alone into the Holy of Holies and there repeated the name. The name was thus withdrawn from and finally lost by the common people. This is ingenious and too literal to cover the case. The old quarry, what is in a name, is, after all, not so easy of answer, or the answer might be everything or nothing, accordingly as you understand it or look at it. Before the introduction of the Masoretic points, or indices of vowel sounds, the consonants were read by metrically intoning the text. The principle of the mantra was therefore known to the high priest at least, and therefore the word, the name, that known in all its plenitude and used with power, caused the whole world to shake, may have been used or invoked in the Holy of Holies by the Kabbalistic Hierophant. Some who read this may be even yet so ignorant of the potency of sound as to smile at the credulity and gullibility that indicts it, and yet so superstitious over the letters of the name as to believe them more sacred in one form than another. Notwithstanding, it is the letter that killeth, and the spirit, the breath, that maketh alive. The consonants composing the Hebrew alphabet are about as sacred as so many wooden blocks, if one knows how to arrange the blocks and endow them with life, so that he may bud and blossom like Aaron's rod. That, of course, is a very different matter. There are dangers inseparable from symbolism, which afford an impressive lesson in regard to similar risks attendant on the use of language. The imagination called in to assist the reason usurps its place or leaves its ally helplessly entangled in its web. Names which stand for things are confounded with them. The means are mistaken for the ends. The instrument of interpretation for the object, and thus symbols come to usurp an independent character as truths and persons. Though perhaps a necessary path, they are a dangerous one by which to approach the deity, in which many, says Plutarch, mistaking the sign for the thing signified, fall into a ridiculous superstition, while others, in avoiding one extreme, plunge into the no less hideous gulf of irreligion and impiety. It is through the mysteries, Cicero says, that we have learned the first principles of life, wherefore the term initiated is used for good reason. To employ nature's universal symbolism instead of the technicalities of language rewards the humblest inquirer and discloses its secret to every one in proportion to his preparatory training to comprehend them. If their philosophical meaning was above the comprehension of some, their moral and political meaning are within the reach of all. These mystic shows and performances were not the reading of a lecture, but the opening of a problem, requiring research. They were calculated to arouse the dormant intellect. They implied no hostility to philosophy, because philosophy is the great expounder of symbolism. There is a grand science known as magic, and every real master is a magician, feared by the ignorant and ridiculed by the learned. The divine science and its masters have, nevertheless, existed in all ages and exist today. Masonry in its deeper meaning and recondite mysteries constitutes and possesses this science, and all genuine initiation consists in an orderly unfolding of the natural powers of the neophyte, so that he shall become the very thing he desires to possess. In seeking magic, he finally becomes the Mayus. All genuine initiation is, like evolution and regeneration, from within. Devoid of this inner meaning and power, all rituals are but foolish jargon, and all ceremonies an empty farce. Even such, the rituals of Masonry have become to many, that the Christ life and the power that made Jesus to be called Christos, Master, whereby he healed the sick, cast out demons, and foretold future events, is the same life revealed and attained by initiation in the Greater Mysteries of Antiquity is perfectly plain. The disrepute into which the divine science has fallen has arisen from the abuse and degeneration. In the Middle Ages, and in fact in every age, there has been dabblers in magic, sorcerers and necromancers, who, possessing some of these secrets and imbued with none of its beneficence, have used their knowledge and power for purely personal and selfish ends. Hypnotism and phenomenal spiritualism are sufficient illustrations of the power to which I refer, and the abuse to which it may put. Magic, per se, is always a science, and up to a certain point, it may be cultivated without regard to its use or the well-being of man, although any abuse of it is fatal to the magician. The popular idea is that education consists largely in the cultivation of the intellectual powers. An average standard of morals is always recommended by educators, and its outward form is illustrated by religious ceremonies. But intellectual cultivation alone, no matter to what extent it may be carried, and the further it goes in this one-sided way, the worse for all concerned, is in no sense an evolution. Perfect intellectual development without spiritual discernment and moral obligation is the sign manual of Satan. Intelligence without goodliness lies athwart the divine plan in the evolution of cosmos. Intellect and altruism by no means necessarily go hand in hand. One may have a very clear intellect, have quick perceptions, and be a good reasoner, and yet be very wicked. On the other hand, one may be very dull intellectually and yet kind, brotherly, and sympathetic to the last degree. A world made up of the former would be a bad place to live in. If of the latter, 1,000 times to be preferred. Magic contemplates that all-around development which, liberating the intellect from the domination of the senses and illuminating the spiritual perceptions, places the individual on the lines of the least resistance with the inflexible laws of nature, and he becomes nature's co-worker or handmaid. To all such, nature makes obeisance and delegates her powers, and they become masters. The real master conceals his power and uses it only for the good of others. He works without the hope of fee or reward, discerning that knowledge is power. Designing and evil men desire to possess both knowledge and power for entirely selfish purposes. It may be readily discerned that the more knowledge and power a purely selfish man possesses, the more inimical to humanity he becomes. He can do less harm if kept in ignorance. This is especially the case in regard to those deeper sciences which deal with mind and influence the thoughts and actions of others. Suppose one were able to hypnotize large numbers of persons at once and compel them to do his bidding, and that his motives were not only selfish, but all results injurious to his agents. Such a person would be a magician, and, as his motives would be purely selfish, a black magician. Modern science, purely materialistic in its aims and conclusions, has always, till very recently, ridiculed the ideal embodied in magic, and were it not for the fact that it has been compelled to recognize under the name hypnotism since the time of the braid, the very force which it denied and condemned in the days of Mesmer. It might be difficult to find a palpable and undeniable illustration of what kind of power is involved in magic, but hypnotism is not even the alphabet of the vocabulary known to the real master or magician. It is but an empirical dabbling in a power of gigantic proportions, the key to which makes of its possessor either a savior or a destroyer of his fellow men. We have only to reflect on the use already made of hypnotism for public expositions, for personal greed by its professors, God save the mark, to determine whether any large output of occult knowledge would be desirable or beneficial to mankind at large. The traditional lost word of the master is a key to all the science of magic. The knowledge of the master is not empirical. It does not consist of a few isolated formula by which certain startling or unusual effects can be produced. The magician's art is based on a science far more deep and exact than modern physical science has yet dreamed of. And back of this science lies a philosophy as boundless as cosmos, as inexhaustible as time, and as beneficent as the Father in heaven. If the Masonic meaning of master, perfect and sublime master, prince adept, etc. is less than I have indicated, then it is a roaring farce, or a stupendous humbug. The concept of Masonry is true, but it has adopted or imitated the ritual and glyphics of a science, the key to which not one Mason in 10,000 possesses, and hence the tradition of the lost word has a literal, no less than a symbolic meaning. The substitute is given to the neophyte, till future generations shall find the true word. The question now propounded to every obligated or so-called Master Mason is the present the generation in which that which was lost shall be found? And each must answer for himself singly, just as he entered his lodge, first saw the light and took his obligation, just as every real master or white adept has done since the beginning of time. There exists in Masonic literature many learned essays on the history, orthography, and philology of the lost word, but I am acquainted with no treatise that apprehends the nature of the real secret like that of Brother Albert Pike in his great work, and yet, if he knew the whole secret, he concealed it at last. The more immediate source from which the legend is imported into Masonry is the Jewish Kabbalah, derived doubtlessly from the Chaldean and Zoroastrian form of a secret doctrine, the principles and methods of which were unfolded by the late laminated Brother J. Ralston Skinner, ancient and accepted Scottish Rite 32nd degree. Brother Skinner's greater works, however, aside from his source of measures and a large number of pamphlets, exist only in manuscript and are of so abstruse a character as to be of little use except to profound scholars. Running all through the Talmud are found references to the secret wisdom, while the Zohar, the Kabbalah Dinudata, and other Kabbalistic works are all written with a veil designed to conceal the secret from the uninitiated, and to be meaningless without the key. Brother Skinner's discoveries were the reward of genius made as the result of stumbling on one of the keys that unlocked the golden gates of the palace of the king. His discoveries lay the foundation for a systematic and scientific study of the Kabbalistic form of the secret doctrine, which lies concealed beneath the Hebrew text of the Pentateuch, and which no commentary has ever revealed or intended to reveal. Perhaps another generation of biblical Hebrew scholars may discard their preconceptions, prejudices, and superstitions of the mere verbiage of the text sufficiently to desire to discover the real meaning of the Pentateuch as to the creation of men and worlds. Copies of Brother Skinner's unpublished researches have been so placed by his special desire and act that they may be preserved for such future investigators and not again be lost to the world. But the Hebrew Kabbalah is but one of many sources from which the secret science may be derived, and it is not the one which in its form of symbolism and method of interpretation is best fitted to the present age. When the symbolism of the Kabbalah is read by the key furnished by Brother Skinner, it requires to be again translated into modern ideals or forms of thought. The basis of it was the Chaldean Book of Numbers, no genuine copy of which, if in existence, is accessible to modern students. Several spurious copies are known to exist, and it is possible that a genuine copy may be produced at the proper time. For be it remembered that genuine masters, Prince Adept Masons, have always existed, and no book or record worth preserving or necessary for the good of man is ever lost, in secret crypts alike inaccessible to the vandal hand of man, and the corrosion of time and decay. These treasures are said to be preserved. All human progress runs in cycles. Modern materialistic science has had its brief day, and philosophy has already undermined its foundations. The new age will show a genuine revival of philosophy. The immortal principles enunciated by Plato, clothed in modern garb of thought, less involved and dialectical, will again command the attention of the thinking world. Everyone is aware that the source of Plato's knowledge was the mysteries. He was an initiate, and on almost every page reveals the obligation he is under, not to betray to the common people the secrets taught only to the initiates under the pledge of secrecy. The foregoing digression seemed necessary in order to show the real basis for the traditions of the lost word, and to put beyond cavil, at least with the more rational, the idea that the Master's word is a real thing, the genuineness and power of which is not overdrawn in the parables and glyphics of Freemasonry. The true word of a Mason is to be found in the concealed and profane meaning of the ineffable name of deity, communicated by God to Moses, rather by the priest of Egypt, and which meaning was long lost by the very precautions taken to conceal it. The true pronunciation of that name was in truth a secret in which, however, was involved the far more profound secret of its meaning. Thus, the ineffable name not only embodies the great philosophical idea that the deity is the ens, the tuon, the absolute existence, that of which the essence is to exist, the only substance of Spinoza, the being that never could not have existed, as contra disentangled from that which only becomes, not nature or the soul of nature, but that which created nature, but also the idea of the male and female principles in its highest and most profound sense, to wit, that God originally comprehended in himself all that is, that matter was not coexistent with him or independent of him, that he did not merely fashion and shape a pre-existing chaos into a universe, but that his thought manifested itself outwardly in that universe, which so became and before was not, except as comprehended in him, that the generative power or spirit and the productive matter, ever among the ancients deemed the female, originally were in God, and that he was and is all that was, that is, and that shall be, in whom all else lives, moves, and has its being. This was the great mystery of the ineffable name. And of course, its true pronunciation and its meaning became lost to all except the select few to whom it was confided, it being concealed from the common people, because the deity, thus metaphysically named, was not that personal and capricious, and as it were, tangible God in whom they believed, and who alone was within reach of their rude capacities. This was the profound truth hidden in the ancient allegory and covered from the general view with a double veil. This was the exoteric meaning of the generation and production of the Indian, Chaldean, and Phoenician cosmogonies, of the active and passive powers, of the male and female principles, of the heaven and its luminaries generating, and the earth producing, all hidden from vulgar view, as above its comprehension. The doctrine that matter is not eternal, but that God was the only original existence, the absolute, from whom everything has proceeded, and to whom everything returns. And this true word is with entire accuracy said to have been lost, because its meaning was lost even among the Hebrews, although we still find the name, its real meaning unsuspected, in the Hu of the Druids and the Fo Hai of the Chinese. There is in nature one most potent force, by means whereof a single man, who could possess himself of it, and should know how to direct it, could revolutionize and change the face of the world. This force was known to the ancients. It is a universal agent, whose supreme law is equilibrium, and whereby, if science can but learn how to control it, it will be possible to change the order of the seasons, to produce in night the phenomena of day, to send a thought in an instant round the world, to heal or slay at a distance, to give our words universal success and make them reverberate everywhere. This agent, partially revealed by the blind guesses of Mesmer, is precisely what the adepts of the Middle Ages called elementary matter of the great work. And this is the force of Keely Motor and the Frohat of the secret doctrine. But to continue our quotations, there is a principal life of the world, a universal agent, wherein are two natures and a double current of love and wrath. This ambient fluid pervades everything. It is a ray detached from the glory of the sun and fixed by the weight of the atmosphere and the central attraction. It is the body of the Holy Spirit, the universal agent, the serpent devouring his own tail. See the seal of TS. With this electromagnetic ether, this vital and luminous caloric, the ancients and the alchemists were familiar. Of this agent, that phase of modern ignorance termed physical science talks incoherently, knowing not of its saving effects, and theology might apply to it all its pretended definitions of spirit. Quiescent, it is appreciable by no human sense, disturbed or in movement. None can explain its mode of action except a real master, and to term it a fluid and speak of its currents is but to veil a profound ignorance under a cloud of words. The Kabbalah alone consecrates the alliance of the universal reason and divine word. It establishes, by the counterpoise of two forces apparently opposite, the eternal balance of being. It alone reconciles reason with faith, power with liberty, science with mystery. It has the keys of the present, the past, and the future. The Bible, with all the allegories it contains, expresses, in an incomplete and veiled manner only, the religious science of the Hebrews, the doctrine of Moses and the prophets, identical at the bottom with that of the ancient Egyptians, also had its outward meaning and its veils. The Hebrew books were written only to recall to memory the traditions, and they were written in symbols unintelligible to the profane. The Pentateuch and the prophetic poems were merely elementary books of doctrine, morals, or liturgy, and the true secret and traditional philosophy was only written afterward, under a veil still less transparent. Thus was a second Bible born, unknown to, or rather uncomprehended by, the Christians of latter times. A collection, they say, of monstrous absurdities, a monument, the adept says, wherein is everything that the genius of philosophy and that of religion have ever formed or imagined of the sublime. A treasure surrounded by thorns, a diamond concealed in a rough dark stone. One is filled with admiration on penetrating into the sanctuary of the Kabbalah, at seeing a doctrine so logical, so simple, and at the same time so absolute. The necessary union of ideas and signs, the consecration of the most fundamental realities by the primitive characters, the trinity of words, letters and numbers, a philosophy simple as the alphabet, profaned and infinite as the world. Theorems more complicated and luminous than those of Pythagoras. A theology summed up by counting on one's finger, an infinity which can be held in the hollow of an infant's hand. 10 ciphers and 22 letters, a triangle, a square, and a circle. These are all the elements of the Kabbalah. These are the elementary principles of the written word, reflection of that spoken word that created the world. And so we might go on quoting from this real master of the veils, that genuine prince of adept among Masons, whose great work, even as a compilation, is a monument more enduring than brass, and more honorable than the crown of kings. If he did not comprehend to the last veil all that he transcribed, and he too used veils, he discerned enough to teach him how to find the whole. It may thus be seen that the Holy Bible, as one of the great lights in Masonry, has a very profound meaning when coupled with the tradition of the ineffable name or lost word. The object set forth before the neophyte in his search for the lost word is that he may travel in foreign lands and receive master's wages. This glyphic in its outer form is taken from the guilds of practical Masons of 2 or 3 centuries ago, The laws then governing the mark of a fellow craft or a master builder were very strict, and the mark was never bestowed unworthily, and when received was a passport among builders over a wide domain. But in a deeper or Kabbalistic sense, the master's word, which entitled its possessor to master's wages, was a very different thing indeed. The wages of the real master were the satisfaction and the power that flow from the possession of real knowledge. Knowledge is power only when one comprehends that which he possesses, and is, therefore, enabled to use it for the purposes that lie nearest his heart. Brother Pike shows conclusively that the power of the word lies in the knowledge of the philosophy which is its perfect synthesis. This is, in part, the meaning of knowing how to pronounce the word. As already stated, the Kabbalah of the ancient Hebrews, which Moses derived by initiation into the mysteries of Egypt and Persia, and which Pike and many others declare was identical among the Hebrews, the Egyptians, Hindus, and other nations of antiquity, was known as the secret doctrine. The reason for such a name is fully revealed in what has been shown hitherto. What Pike says regarding the relationship of the Pentateuch to the Kabbalah is true of the exoteric scriptures of every nation of antiquity. How many generations of imbeciles or materialists, think you, my brother, would it require to recover it? The great majority of mankind in every age not only do not possess the secret and the power of the Master's word, but are incapable of comprehending it. We do not know a thing because we are told that it is so. Let the gods shout the truth of all the ages into the ears of a fool forever, and still forever the fool would be joined to his folly. Here lies the conception and the principle of all initiations. It is knowledge unfolded by degrees in an orderly, systematic manner, step by step, as the capacity to apprehend opens in the neophyte. The result is not a possession, but a growth, an evolution. Knowledge is not a mere sum in addition, something added to something that already exists, but rather such a progressive change or transformation of the original treasure as to make of it at every step a new being. Real knowledge, or the growth of wisdom in man, is an eternal becoming, a progressive transformation into the likeness of the supernal goodness and the supreme power. Initiation and regeneration are synonymous terms. The ritual of Freemasonry is based on this natural law, and the ceremony of initiation illustrates at every step this principle, and if the result attained is a possession rather than a regeneration, in a great majority of cases, the principle remains nonetheless true. The mere inculcation of moral principles or lessons in ethics, and their symbolic illustrations and dramatic representations are by no means in vain. These appeal to the conscious and moral sense in every man, and no man has ever been made worse by the lessons of the lodge. By these rights and benefits, the Freemason is, above all men in our so-called modern society, the nearest to the ancient wisdom. He has possession of the territory in which lie concealed the crown jewels of wisdom. He may content himself, if he will, by merely turning over the sod and gathering only a crop of husker stubble. He may dig deeper and find not only the keystone of the arch, the Ark of the Covenant, the scroll, or the law, but using the spirit concealed in the wings of the cherubim, he may rise untrammeled by the rubbish of the temple, and, meeting Elohim face to face, learn also to say, I am that I am. Does this read like a rhapsody? And are the landmarks, traditions, and glyphics of Freemasonry nothing more? The real temple referred to, from first to last in Masonry, as in all ancient initiations, is the tabernacle of the human soul. It is built, indeed, without the sound of hammer or any tool of iron. It is like, meaning made in the likeness of, that other spiritual temple, not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. For the old philosophy, or the Kabbalah, teaches that the immortal spirit of man is the artificer of the body and its source of life, that it does not so much enter in as overshadow man, while the soul, the immediate vehicle of the spirit, inhabits the body and is dispatched at death. The spirit is immortal, pure, and forever undefiled. It is the Christos or Hiram, the mediator between the soul or physical man and the universal spirit, the Father in heaven, the poor blind candidate, that is, the man of sense, immersed in matter, would learn the ineffable name and obtain the lost word, seeking a shortcut, climbs up some other way. He would have wisdom without self-conquest, power without sacrifice. He will not listen to the voice of pleading. Be patient, my brother, and when the temple is completed, if found worthy, you shall receive that for which you have so long wrought. No, he will have it now. And he silences the pleading voice and, defeating only himself, flees into the deserts of remorse and calls upon the rocks to hide him from the pursuit of his accusing conscience. Hiram, or Christos, is resurrected. Being immortal, he cannot really die. No sin of man is final. Realizing his error and purified by suffering, the spirit in man being again lifted up, even defeat gives promise of victory, and he receives a substitute for the lost word. He hears, however, faint and dim, the divine harmony. Future generations, that is, further trials and more sincere endeavor, promise greater reward. He learns to know, to will, to dare, and to keep silent. Brotherly love, relief and truth, prudence, fortitude, justice and mercy. All the virtues and all the beatitudes are inculcated. The candidate is taught not merely to tolerate another's religion, but to respect it as his own, though still adhering to that into which he was born. To make reasonable this obligation, he is shown through the Kabbalah, or secret doctrine, that at the heart of every religion lie the same eternal truths. Forms and observances only differ. The ineffable name is spelled in many ways, yet the word is one and eternal. Masonry is not only a universal science, but a worldwide religion, and owes allegiance to no one creed, and cannot adopt no sectarian dogma, as such, without ceasing thereby to be Masonic, drawn from the Kabbalah and taking the Jewish or Christian verbiage or symbols. It but discerns in them universal truths, which it recognizes in all other religions. Many degrees have been Christianized only to perish, as every degree eventually will if circumscribed by narrow creeds, and dwarfed to the bigoted apprehension, so as to exclude good men of any other communion. Is Jesus any less the Christos because Krishna was called the Good Shepherd, or because the Mexican Christ was crucified between two thieves, or because Hiram was 3 days in the grave before he was resurrected? Are we not as selfish in our religion as in our other possessions? Then why is man, while cherishing as its most sacred possession the religion of his fathers, eternally seeking to degrade and destroy that of his brother? The Great Republic, to which Brother Pike refers, is the ideal of Masonry, the genius that hovers like a protecting angel over the lodge, making it impossible for a Jew or a Parsi, Buddhist or Brahmin, to enter any lodge without witnessing the profanation of his sacred altars, or contempt for his religion, and the angel hides her face and retreats from altars already profaned by unbrotherliness. Masonry is the universal religion only because, and only so long, as it embraces all religions. For this reason and this alone, it is universal and eternal. Neither persecution nor misrepresentation can ever destroy it. It may find no place in a generation of bigots. It may retire for a century, but again comes a master builder, with the key to the shut-up palace of the king, throws open the blinds, lets in the light, kindles anew the fire on the sacred altar, clears away the rubbish, when behold, the tessellated pavement is as bright as when it first came from the poise of truth. The jewels are of pure gold and brighten at the touch, and the great lights are undimmed and undecayed. When the candidate is ready, the master appears. And yet men are so foolish and so vile as to imagine that they can destroy this heirloom of the ages, this heritage from the immortals. No age is so dark as to quench entirely the light of the lodge. No persecution so bloody as to blot out its votaries. No anathemas of popes so lasting as to count 1 second off its dial of time. These, one and all, serve only to keep the people in darkness and retard the reign of universal brotherhood. Therefore, humanity, the great orphan, the real master laminates. He smiles at the passions of the popes or kings, and pities the folly of man. He only awaits, indifferent as to the results, knowing these to be under eternal law, but ready and willing, whenever and wherever the instruction entering the listening ear may find lodgment in the faithful breast. For ages, kings, popes, and synods have done their best to kill this secret doctrine by anathematizing or burning its masters. The Jesuits got possession of its lodges, transformed out of all recognition many of its degrees, and made of them an abject tool of the sacerdotal hierarchy. At last, the Jesuits became glutted with gold and impudent with power, and the church became frightened and destroyed, or banished the destroyers. Will power in high places ever desist or relax its warfare? Never. It can, however, be forever ignored or defied, but it will never allow its secrets to be laid bare, and a greater to stand in its place. He who anticipates such beneficence has read history in vain. The kingdom of heaven is taken by force, but it is moral force or moral courage, and the first great battle is for the conquest of self, the subjugation of the time-serving spirit, which, joined to the idols of the flesh, is blind to the truths of the eternal spirit. He who conquers here may at last become master. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Rosies. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.